What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Pokemon TCG Pocket video. So I competed in a tournament recently. This is the Frog EX Weekly Cup. It had about 700 players in it, and I placed 24th with a GALLADE EX Lucario deck with a 7-3 record. Honestly, I'm not super happy with my performance. I know this is good, but I really wanted to do better, man. I really wanted to get first place, at least maybe like top 8, but still a good performance nonetheless. And shout out to these guys who put this tournament together at Frog EX. A couple of them hopped into my chat and, were saying hi to me, being very friendly, supporting me while I was streaming this tournament. So shout out to them. This tournament ran very smoothly. So again, shout out to them. Definitely recommend checking out their tournaments if you're looking to get into any competitive play in this game. So I wanted to take a look and kind of just review my performance in this tournament real quick. And first, we got to start off with the deck list here. So let me bring up the image. So this is the deck that I was running. It's essentially the same that I played in my recent video I did, I think it was like last week, on a GALLADE EX deck. The only difference I made here is I swapped out a Giovanni for Pokemon Communication. I'm not exactly sure which one is better, to be honest. There were times where I played the Pokemon Communication and I got exactly what I needed, right? I needed the Kirlia, I needed the GALLADE, I needed the Lucario. So Pokemon Communication was very clutch in that instance, but there were a lot of games where I just needed 10 more damage to KO their Pokemon. So I was really missing Giovanni in this deck. So it's hard to say whether Pokemon Communication or Giovanni is better. I think maybe I would slightly value Pokemon Communication a little bit higher, just because me personally, I tend to value consistency more. So maybe Pokemon Communication was a little bit better overall, but there were a couple matches where it felt bad, where I just really needed a Giovanni, but I didn't have it. So anyways, the rest of the deck list here, we're running 2 of the new Ralts, 2 of the new Kirlias. We are only running Fighting Energy in this deck, no Psychic Energy. 2 of the GALLADE EX, 2 Riolu, 2 Lucario, 1 Hitmonlee, and 1 Hitmonchan for our Pokemon here. So this deck is pretty nasty. I think what makes this deck really good is that it doesn't mind going either first or second. If you're going first, you can evolve first from Ralts into Kirlia or Riolu into Lucario. And then if you're going second, well, then you can start attacking first, right? And usually with this deck, I like to lead off with either a Hitmonchan or Hitmonlee. If they have something in the active that you want to beat up on, you put in Hitmonchan, attack for 30 damage or 50 if you have your Lucario on the board. Or if they're running a Druddigon in front, or maybe they have a Pokemon with a Rocky Helmet in the active spot, then you can lead off with Hitmonlee and start attacking their bench. And that's essentially the game plan, is start off with Hitmonchan or Hitmonlee while you start attacking. You're looking for your Riolu and Lucario and your GALLADE EX pieces. So this deck performed pretty well for me. I was pretty pleased with the performance. I don't know if this is the perfect deck list, but I think it is a good deck list nonetheless. I think GALLADE EX is a really good Pokemon because it has 170 HP and it only attacks for 2 energy. Since it has 170 HP, it can survive things such as Gyarados EX, Palkia EX. It has a lot of HP, so it has a lot of bulk to it, and it's going to do more damage depending on how much energy is attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So a lot of decks are pretty greedy right now with energy ramp. Every meta deck kind of has some form of energy ramp right now. Charizard has Moltres, metal decks have Dialga, water decks have Misty and Manaphy, grass decks have Serperior. So a lot of decks right now have a lot of energy ramp. So GALLADE EX is going to punish those kind of decks. And it kind of makes your opponent kind of hesitant, to put in those Pokemon that have a lot of energy on them. So this was actually really good against Charizard EX. I played against a couple Charizard. I'll probably talk about those matchups a little bit more here. But talking about the rest of the cards in the deck, 2 research, 2 Pokeball, no surprise there. Already talked about the Pokemon communication a bit. It's just there to help consistency find the Pokemon that you need. Then we have 1 copy of Cyrus. This guy is absolutely clutch. This guy is game winning sometimes, especially with the Hitmonlee. I think it makes more sense to run Cyrus in this deck over Sabrina, because you can snipe something with Hitmonlee for 30 damage, bring it to the active with Cyrus, and then you can just win out the game with your GALLADE EX, right? So Cyrus is an absolute beast in this deck. Really like the 1 of Cyrus here. And then of course we have 2x speed. Another benefit to GALLADE EX is that it retreats for 1, which is really nice. All of our Pokemon actually retreat for 1 except for Lucario, which has a retreat cost of 2, but not too big of a deal. X speed is usually fine anyway, so I like having X speed to kind of move my Pokemon around between the bench and the active spot. So now I kind of want to go over the matchups that I played against real quick. So I ended up going 7-2 in the Swiss rounds. Unfortunately, I did lose round 1 in Top Cut for top 32. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I kind of want to just start from the beginning here. First off, I played against a Palkia Vaporeon deck. I'll go ahead and put it on the screen for you. So this deck was a little bit interesting in the fact that it ran Palkia, Vaporeon, and Greninja. I don't see a lot of people running Greninja in these Palkia decks, mainly Palkia, Vaporeon, and an Articuno. I don't think this person played necessarily bad or anything. I just think the deck list wasn't particularly optimized. I'm not really a big fan of this deck list with the 1 Greninja line and the 1 Rocky Helmet. I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of this deck. Round 2 was a pretty interesting deck. This was actually a 17 trainer Articuno deck. It had 2 Articuno EX, 1 Spiritomb, and a whole plethora of trainer cards. This deck was actually a little bit scary, if I recall correctly. We did go to a game 3 because all these games are best out of 3. So we did go to a game 3 here, and I mean, Misty is going to do Misty things, right? If you high roll with Misty, you can just win the game. The Spiritomb tech is kind of interesting. It does make sense here with things such as Cyrus, right? Because you can do 10 damage to all of your opponent's active Pokemon and then pull them back with the Cyrus. So this deck was a little bit scary, to be honest, but I think like most 18 trainer sort of decks, they're kind of gimmicky, at least in my opinion. Like with these 18 trainer Articuno decks, you either like win like really hard, like you high roll Misty, you get all the draws you need, or you just lose really bad. So I think this person just kind of got unlucky on some of their coin flips or their draws, but they definitely could have beaten me for sure. All right, and round 3, I did go up against a Charizard EX player. So this is what I have been seeing a lot of people playing Charizard lately. Not exactly this exact deck list. There are a couple things I think most people would change here. For example, the 2 Giovanni might seem a little bit weird, but I will say the Giovanni actually did kind of come in handy for them a couple of times, because Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee both have 80 HP. Moltres attacks for 70, so 70 with the Giovanni was able to one-shot my Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee, and surprisingly enough, that did come up in a few of our games. So the Giovanni, you know, ordinarily I wouldn't put it in this deck because with Charizard EX, you don't need Giovanni, but I guess it makes sense if you get really unlucky and you don't draw your Charizard evolution and you're forced to attack with the Moltres. But then you're also running 2 Pokemon communication in this deck, so you shouldn't really be getting that unlucky draws. I don't know. It's kind of a weird deck list. Like, I don't agree with the Giovanni, but it worked. That's basically what I'm trying to say, is like on paper, Giovanni shouldn't work in this deck, but it kind of did work against my deck. Regardless, the game plan here was pretty simple. It was just try to rush them down as fast as possible. I think one game I even sniped their Charmander with Hitmonlee before it even got to a chance to evolve. If you can do that, you're probably winning the game. And the thing with this deck is it's kind of risky to play the Charizard against GALLADE EX, right? Because if you high roll Moltres and you stack a ton of energy on Charizard EX, then that's just more damage for your GALLADE EX. So I think there was a time maybe where I did some chip damage on the Charizard with my Hitmonlee. I got it within KO range of my Gallade EX, and they just were scared to put the Charizard in, right? Because if you put in Charizard and it has like 5 energy loaded up on it, I'm just taking out that thing with Gallade EX. So a really interesting kind of back and forth matchup as to like who's gonna make the first big play here. So overall, I did come away with the win with this deck, but shout out to my opponent who played this very well. All right, and then finally I ran into a Darkrai deck, first of many Darkrai decks. A lot of people were playing Darkrai, of course, very strong card. So this one was running 2 Darkrai, 2 Druddigon, and 2 Greninja lines. This deck was pretty nasty. I did come away with a win against this deck, but I think it was a very, very tight game if I remember correctly. This list is pretty solid, to be honest. The only thing I might want to change is maybe put in a second leaf here instead of the potion, but I think potion is really good too. I don't know, it's kind of hard to say, but I think if it were me playing this deck, I would want a second leaf in there somewhere. But the 2 copies of Cyrus is just absolutely dirty in this deck because you have so much chip damage with Greninja, Darkrai, and Druddigon, so you're chipping away at your opponent's Pokemon, and you can essentially pull back any of them with the Cyrus, once you get like Greninja online. So it's pretty disgusting. The Pokemon communication makes this deck more consistent as well, being able to find the Greninjas more consistently. So this was a really, really nasty deck. I came away with the win, but again, shout out to my opponent. This was a really good matchup. Next round, I played another Charizard EX deck. So this deck on paper, I actually like it more than the previous one that we looked at, since there are no Giovanni. It's running more healing with Potion and Giant Cape. You can tank more damage with your Moltres EX. That way you have more time to get your Charizard EX set up online. I did come away with the win on this matchup as well. Again, the same game plan pretty much is just to try and rush them down before they get the Charizard EX online. And if they do get online, then we hold onto our Gallade EX, and then when they attack with the Charizard, we can then counterattack with the Gallade EX. And sometimes you might get lucky where you can snipe the Charmander with your Hitmonlee before it even gets to a chance to evolve. All right, and this was my first loss in the tournament. So this was a Darkrai Weavile deck, and they were only playing 1 Darkrai, which is kind of insane to me. I was thinking when I saw this deck, I was like, oh, only 1 Darkrai, I'm gonna win this easy, right? But no, I got my ass kicked by this deck, even though they're running 1 Darkrai, right? I don't know if that was intentional. Maybe they only pulled 1 Darkrai. I have no idea, but it worked for them. I think the reason I lost here is they did get some good coin flips, right? I think there was one game where I lost to a Sneasel. They didn't even attack me with Weavile EX. They just rolled heads with me with Sneasel and absolutely steamrolled me. But I think there was a game as well where they just got the perfect setup, right? It's when they're going first, they put an energy on Darkrai, they do 20 damage, then they play Dawn, they move that energy to the Sneasel in the active spot, evolve into Weavile, attack for 70, plus the 20 from Darkrai is a total of 90 damage. That is like one of the strongest attacks you can do in the game going first. So once you do that, like, it's kind of hard to come back from that, and that's basically what happened to me. I don't remember if we went to 3 games or 2 games, but yeah, I do remember one game they started off with that crazy opener with the Darkrai Dawn into Weavile, and then the other game they just flipped heads on me with the Sneasel and just KO'd me. So yeah, this deck is just nuts. It just shows the absolute power of Darkrai. Even if you're running 1, this card is still insanely good, right? So I really like this list. I would just definitely add a second Darkrai. I have to assume it's because they only have 1 copy of Darkrai. I don't know why there would be an intentional reason to only run 1 Darkrai, right? But anyways, it worked and they beat me. So after that loss, I came back and I took a win against Darkrai Magnezone, which is considered to be the best deck in the game right now. What I will say, however, is I do not like how they are running 1 Kangaskhan and 1 Druddigon. I think it's better to just run 2 Druddigon. I think Kangaskhan, unfortunately, has kind of just been power crept by Druddigon at this point. I mean, Kangaskhan still can be better than Druddigon in some scenarios, right? Like if you're just flipping double heads with Kangaskhan every turn, like that's 60 damage for 1 energy. That's pretty nuts, right? But the fact that it has a retreat cost of 3, I don't like about Kangaskhan, and you don't have to invest any energy into the Druddigon for it to deal damage, right? So if I were playing this deck list, I would have just run 2 Druddigon over 1 Kangaskhan and 1 Druddigon, but that's just me personally. So Darkrai Magnezone, you know, I actually have a good matchup into this deck list because I'm playing fighting type Pokemon, right? And Magnezone is weak to fighting Pokemon. So GALLADE EX just absolutely smokes Magnezone. GALLADE EX absolutely just stomped this deck. Of course, they still can win because it is still a very, very strong deck, right? With the Darkrai, the Magnezone, and then they have Pokemon Communication for more consistency. They had a lot of tools here, right? They got a Giovanni, they got a Cape, they got a Cyrus, Sabrina, so they got a lot of tools here. So oddly enough, the best deck in the game, or at least supposedly best deck in the game, is actually not that bad of a matchup for me since Magnezone is weak to fighting type Pokemon. And next came my second loss in the tournament, another Darkrai deck. As I got further and further into the tournament, I just kept playing against more Darkrai decks. So this person was running 2 Darkrai, 2 Greninja lines, and 2 Kangaskhan. So this one, again, on paper, I saw the Kangaskhan. I was like, what? You're running Kangaskhan over Druddigon? But it worked. It worked. I don't know what to say other than it worked. They beat my ass with the Kangaskhan. This deck list is pretty straightforward. I actually really like it. I like the double leaf. Double Cyrus definitely makes sense with the Greninja and the Darkrai. Research Pokeball, double communication for that extra consistency for your Greninja line. So this is a very simple but very effective deck. Again, I saw this deck on paper. I did not think the Kangaskhan was going to be that useful. I thought, you know, Druddigon is just always better. But, you know, again, if you're just flipping heads nonstop with Kangaskhan, then hey, you know, there's nothing you can do about that. I'm curious to see how this deck performs against basically the same version, but just Druddigon instead of Kangaskhan. Let me know you guys' thoughts on that. Are you team Druddigon or are you team Kangaskhan? For me personally, I think Druddigon is better, but again, this deck kicked my ass, so what do I know? All right, and this was the last deck that I faced in Swiss rounds. It's another Darkrai Greninja deck. This one is running Druddigon, and this one has a little bit more variety in its trainer cards. You got a couple Cyrus, you got a Leaf, Potion, 1 Pokemon Communication, and a Rocky Helmet. Not too much else to say about this deck, really. It's just the game plan with my deck against this one is if they're starting off with the Druddigon, you just, you know, start chipping away at their bench with Hitmonlee, or if they have a Darkrai or a Froakie or Frogadier in the active, then you just chip away with Hitmonchan, and then you just want to get your Lucario and your GALLADE EX, and then just try and win the game from there. Pretty simple game plan. I was lucky enough to come away with a win on this one, but as always, shout out to my opponent. They played this game very well as well. So this is the deck I lost to in the first round of the top 32. I think we're going to be seeing more of this deck often. Maybe not this exact version, but I think we're going to be seeing a lot more Executor decks coming up because this deck just absolutely destroyed me. Like, it looks like a weird deck on paper, right? Like, we got 2 Execute, 2 Executor EX, 1 of the Mythical Island Executor, and 1 Celebi. So it looks kind of weird. Not a lot of Pokemon, but there is a lot of trainer cards here. And this deck was just a really bad matchup for me because if you recall, GALLADE EX is going to do more damage depending on how much energy is attached to your opponent's Pokemon. And Executor EX only attacks for 1 energy. So GALLADE EX is only doing 90 damage to Executor EX, and then they have a ton of healing with Erica and the Giant Cape. So there wasn't a way for me to get rid of the Executor EX cleanly which really was just a big problem for my deck. They do have the Psychic Executor from Mythical Island, which attacks for 4 energy, but they just never played that one, which I have to assume was intentional. That is, that's a smart play on them, right? Because if they have 4 energy on it, my GALLADE EX is just going to one-shot it. So I think that is just a backup in case you don't find your EX Executors. I think you can run that one, the Psychic Executor, or the baby executor, right? That's essentially just a weaker version of the EX. I think it's just a backup in case you don't find the EX version. And then the one Celebi. The one Celebi is kind of interesting as well. It's just another backup attacker, right? I think he did attack with Celebi a couple times, but the Executor EX was what really challenged my deck. He just had full control over me too, because he has so little Pokemon in this deck. He can run so many trainer cards. This guy is running double Sabrina and double Cyrus, which is just absolutely disgusting, man. Like, he can just if I have a Riolu in the back, I'm trying to evolve it into Lucario, he can just pull it with a Sabrina, flip heads, take out my Riolu's dead, right? Or if he does some damage on, let's say, GALLADE EX in the active, I retreat it to the bench, he just pulls it back with the Cyrus. So this deck was pretty nasty, man. This deck just absolutely stomped me. We did go to a game 3, so it was close, but it didn't feel that close. I think the game I won, I barely won because they didn't find an Executor, right? They just had to execute, and I think I just KO'd it and won the game that way. So yeah, this deck was pretty nuts. Definitely expect to see more Executor EX decks in the future. I don't know if we're gonna see like this exact version. I've seen people run like Mew EX over Celebi, right? I think both are good, but I think Executor EX is really good in the current meta right now, especially since Darkrai is weak to grass type Pokemon. But with the rise of Executor EX, that might cause a rise in Charizard decks, because Charizard would absolutely eat this deck alive, right? Because he can one-shot Celebi EX or Executor EX. So who knows? The meta is still changing. We might see more Charizard decks as a result of this. And if you're curious who actually won this tournament, it was this person here. I think their name is pronounced Gleon or Gleon. Kind of similar deck to what we were just looking at, the one I lost to. They're not running the Psychic Executor, but instead just 2 Execute, 2 Executor EX, and 1 Celebi EX, and a whole bunch of trainer cards, right? This one's running Potion. This one is running Rocky Helmet as well. I think Rocky Helmet is really good with Executor, since it has such high HP and you can heal it with the Erica for 50 HP. You're going to be attacking into this Executor EX multiple times, and every time you attack into it, Rocky Helmet is just going to get more and more value. So unless you're playing something like a Charizard EX that can one-shot it, right? This is just an absolute nightmare for decks that just like to do little bursts of damage like my deck did, right? So this deck was pretty disgusting as well. Again, shout out to Gleon, who piloted this deck to first place for a 13-1 record. Very impressive. So I just wanted to kind of share my experience with this tournament, because I think tournament play is a lot of fun. I actually would say tournament play is more fun than just queuing into random matches. At least that's my opinion. Some people might prefer queuing into random matches without the competitive stress on it, or maybe some people don't even battle at all. They just collect the cards, right? I'm sure there's a bunch of people who just don't even play the game. They just open packs and collect cards, right? Hey, but you do you, man. That was it. Really just kind of wanted to share my experience. 24th place out of 700 plus players. Pretty good placement, but I want to do better. I need to get a first place win here, man. These tournaments are tough. Even with a best of 3, there is still going to be some variance, right? Where maybe you just get an absolute terrible hand, or maybe you just get some really bad coin flips, you get a really bad matchup. So even best of 3 can be kind of tough sometimes, man. Like this deck, this Executor Celebi deck, was just a really bad matchup for my deck. So yeah, that's kind of it. That's my experience. again, shout out to Frog EX. Check out their tournament. I'll leave a link to the website where you can play in tournaments in the description of this video in case you want to check out any tournaments for yourself. And let me know what you think about this video. Let me know if you want to see more tournament analysis like this, or maybe do you want to see more actual gameplay of tournament with me kind of breaking down each play by play, or do you want me to go over like the meta game in these tournaments? Let me know what you think. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and I appreciate you guys watching. I'll see you in the next one. Later.